Chicago's Morning Answer continues next on AM 560, The Answer.
Now, from the Signature Bank Studios, this is Chicago's Morning Answer with Dan Proft and Amy Jacobson on AM 560, The Answer.
Top of the morning, Dan and Amy. So it's always sad when you see the left cannibalizing the left. So I'm a bit distraught over this acrimony that exists between the management of the New York Times and the Guild.
What's going on?
The union of New York Times employees.
Oh, no.
There's a strike. And what do the Guild members want? All kinds of stuff.
Justice, when do we want it now?
Yeah, right away. One of Jesse Waters' people went out to the picket line and asked them what they want. And it's a great insight into the mindset of your median New York Times employee.
What are you guys on strike about?
We've been at the bargaining table for 20 months now. The company is consistently coming into the bargaining table with proposals that are insulting and unacceptable.
The New York Times is making record profits, and the people who make the news need to share in that.
It's a variety of issues, but the big things are we haven't had a raise in over 2 years.
What are they not giving you?
They're not giving basic floor wages of $65,000.
I'll be honest, I don't know the details that specifically.
We have been working through the entire pandemic without any salary increases at a time of record inflation.
Is this about coming back to the office?
It's also about coming back to the office.
Of course, we also want to make sure that we are protecting people. You know, we're still living through a pandemic.
Remote work is part of the negotiations.
We find it ridiculous that the company is maintaining this position, that it have the unilateral right to call us back in 5 days a week.
I thought the New York Times respected unions, so what happened there?
You'll have to ask them.
That's an excellent question. I would love an answer to that as well.
Excellent question. We'd love to hear what the management has to say about that.
Yeah, it's a very good question. We thought the New York Times respected unions too.
What happens to the New York Times when you guys are on strike?
We'll find out.
We have said we're not going to write stories. We have photo people, we have electricians, other people in the building who are not working today. They have to figure it out on their own.
I am refusing to write. I'm refusing to respond to edits.
I imagine they're having quite a hard time putting the publication together.
The New York Times can't run without the people who run the New York Times. And management needs to know that.
And they need to know that now.
Yeah, they need extra money for all that personal protective equipment because we're still in the pandemic, the PPE. So they need the masks and they need the guards. And
I can't believe he said that we're still in a pandemic.
We're going to see how easily this would be great if they basically, I mean, they could replace all of these people with English majors from Vassar tomorrow. So it'll be interesting to see how New York Times management, sitting on those record profits, treats those striking New York Times employees. Boy, as somebody who has had some experience dealing with obstreperous unions, like those that took over the Capitol during his tenure, former Wisconsin Governor Scott Walker joins us. He's also now the president and CEO of Young America's Foundation. Scott, thanks for joining us. Appreciate it.
Hey, good morning. Yeah, when it comes right down to the big holdout is they just don't want to go in the office 5 days a week.
Yeah. Well, how dare they be on call 5 days a week for their 40-hour week job?
It's like unions brought us the weekend, they brought us the 8-hour workday, and now they brought us. You don't have to actually work in the office anymore. Unbelievable.
Well, no wonder
the rest of the world's laughing at us at times like this.
Yeah, what is the state of? I mean, just in Wisconsin, because it varies greatly from state to state. What is the strength of the public sector unions in terms of their political might in Wisconsin? Have they been able to regain some political power since your tenure?
No, they took a massive drop. Particularly AFSCME, which is the municipal, the county, the statewide employees. saw a tremendous drop. You saw the teachers union as well. When given a chance, so many of these good public servants said, I don't want to be a part of a union. They're not adding me any value to my professionalism. And on top of that, they're often endorsing and strongly behind candidates that fly against their values. So you've seen a tremendous drop. You were a teacher in Wisconsin years ago, and you're, say, in Milwaukee and paying about $1,500 for your state and local dues, and you said, hey, I can use that, for my family, for my kids' education, for wherever it might be. They've seen a huge drop. The unions still have an impact, but not because of the local or state unions. It's because of the union money that comes in from outside of Wisconsin to help in these statewide races for the Supreme Court, for governor, other things. But in state, the unions have taken a massive dive because when workers have a chance, they choose not to be in a union.
So what's happening in Wisconsin? I'm just interested. I know everybody's just focused on the battleground polls and the Trump versus Harris matchups, and then maybe below the fold a little bit to look at the underlying dynamics of the race. But then I see a Senate race that the Republican Senatorial Committee is not involved in yet. I'm talking about Eric Hovde versus Tammy Baldwin. Tammy Baldwin, the prohibitive favorite. She's never lost an election in Wisconsin, as far as I understand. And Hovde, but Hovde is within striking distance now, and it wow. feels very much like Ron Johnson when he was the underdog, even as an incumbent, and then he scraped out a victory in the end. What's your handle on Wisconsin generally, and also whether or not that's a possible Senate pickup?
Yeah, I think it is possible. Obviously, a key part in that link, as it has been historically, is what happens at the top of the ticket. If Donald Trump were to win, not just win, but say he won by 3 or 4 points, that makes it much more likely that someone like Eric Hovde could win. If he loses, it makes it much less likely. And if it's where it probably is today, which is it's a draw between Trump and Harris, it's probably a little bit of advantage to the incumbent Tammy Baldwin right now. She's played it well. I mean, she is a hardcore liberal, but she talks that way in D.C. and New York and San Francisco. She doesn't talk that way back home in Wisconsin. She kind of follows the Herb Kohl model when he was in the Senate of really good constituent services. Don't draw much attention to yourself, and then every 5.5 years come out with bills that sound like you're reasonable, and that's exactly what she's done. She's been there between the House and the Senate for more than a quarter century now, and I think the Hovde campaign needs to stress that even more because I think even independent and even some discerning Democrats say, hey, quarter a century for anybody, that's too long to be in Washington. He's a good candidate. He's sharp. He goes on multiple media outlets. It's just a tough race just because she's playing it. It's kind of like Sherrod Brown in Ohio, completely out of sorts with the climate there. But the guy's shrewd, and he's been around for a long time.
Well, you would think, too. I was tickled by the one New York Times employee who said, we haven't gotten a raise in this high inflation environment. Oh, you mean that high inflation environment your paper spends all the time trying to, pretend isn't the environment right now on behalf of their candidates of choice? Sort of the same thing in Wisconsin. I mean, you've got a lot of middle-income families there that are feeling the squeeze, and Hovde is this very successful businessman whose family has a pretty good footprint up in the Madison area, as I understand it, in terms of their businesses.
There's actually a building across the Capitol with their name on it.
Right, and so sort of like Ron Johnson's, maybe we need somebody who's actually run something and done something outside of government to come in and be our representative, kind of thing.
Well, I think that's exactly right, and I believe in the end, a lot of factors, Wisconsin is the ultimate swing state in the sense that it's about 80% is decided. About half of that leans one way, half leans the other. And it's a small percentage of the voters who end up being swing voters in both directions in the elections. Number one issue right now is the economy by far. We even find it in the polling we do at Young America's Foundation of college students by far, almost 2-to-1 over the next issue. And so if you talk about high prices, you make the case there. You make the case that in 12 of the last 16 years, there's been a Democrat in the White House, Tammy Baldwin, Kamala Harris, they've all been in charge over the last 3.5 years. The first 2 years, absolute control, no check or balance even from the House or the Senate. And look at the mess that we're in. That's the message I think that penetrates for President Trump to win. Hopefully, Hovde is able to make the case and connect the dots with Baldwin. That's the benefit of someone like Baldwin, Brown, a few others. who kind of defy the odds because they shrink into the shrubs and make out like they weren't in office or involved with this. But they've just got to connect the dots, and obviously at the top of the ticket, that's the key to winning. Everything, if I had any advice for President Trump, and I've said this before, is every answer he says from here now to the election should be all about, hey, things were better when I was president.
Yep.
They've gotten worse with higher prices, border security, and public safety concerns. They're only going to get better if you put me back in and get rid of the gang that has messed us up.
Now, Governor Walker, we haven't spoken to you since the debate. Did that performance help or hurt Trump?
Well, it's a mixed bag. I mean, all the pundits all thought, said she won. Certainly, she was much better than Biden. Heck, if you show up at the polls, you're better than Biden was in that first debate. But I think I give voters more credit than many in the national media do. I think they could see through that. First question out the gate when David Murr asked her about the economy versus 4 years ago, and she just punted. She started talking about being from a middle-class family, the same sort of talking points she's used in the one solo interview since then. I think voters see through that even though a lot of missed opportunities. It's a good example of, I think, it's a mistake that President Trump doesn't do more sophisticated debate prep, because I think he could have knocked her out of the race completely had he jumped on a few of those things and not taken the bait on January 6th or on the size of the crowds, but rather just said every answer. She can't answer this question because she knows life was better when he was president, and it's only going to get better when he is. Thankfully, I think the voters know that. They understand that. They didn't hear any good answers from her other than rehearsed lines. So I think it's kind of like the Reagan movie. The critics hate it, the people love it. The same thing's true here. I think the voters that matter, the swing voters, may have thought she was better than Biden, but in the end didn't hear anything from her that made them feel more comfortable that she would be better than what they've had the last 3.5 years.
RFK Jr. was in state yesterday up in Wisconsin. What is his potential impact in a state like Wisconsin in terms of, out there actively campaigning for Trump with a little bit of a below the fold message, though I think that has some appeal and some interest, populist interest, sort of the Make America Healthy Again mantra?
Yeah, I think, he's one of those, not going to be a major shift, but in a state like Wisconsin where the margin was 25,000 votes or less the last two presidential elections, I think the margins matter. And so he's not going to move, 5-10% of the vote. But if you've got a few people who are suspect, I think even more than just the health side, it's just the argument that Democrats are corrupt. The Biden-Harris campaign was corrupt. All the stuff that they've done, what they tried to do to him, the idea that he's fighting against the machine, and that Donald Trump's going to take on the machine, he's going to take on the establishment, he's going to take on the swamp. I think that's appealing for niche voters who can be swing voters in states like Wisconsin. And so, again, on the margins, take everything you can get. Will you sway massive numbers? Probably not, but it doesn't matter. Margins are what matters right now.
And the ballot integrity operation, the GOTV effort that is being assembled for Wisconsin, what's your assessment of that?
Yeah, I think Whatley, the new RNC chair, has done a really good job with that. He's put the pressure on the state party. They're still going to need more. I contend they should be in court making sure that in big places like Milwaukee and Dane County that they're following the state statutes. The laws, by and large, are good in Wisconsin. I know I signed some of them, many of the most effective ones. They just have to be enforced. 4 years ago, that was the problem. It wasn't the lack of the laws. The only gap we've seen since then was the Zucker bucks, but the state constitution was amended this last spring to prohibit that, outside influences operating elections. So if they follow the law, which is why you got to go to court now, trying to fix it after the fact, as we all know, living near Lake Michigan is kind of like spitting in the lake. It doesn't do any good. So you got to do it now. And for anyone who's concerned about what happened 4 years ago, volunteer to be not a poll worker, but a poll watcher, someone who shows up at the polls, particularly people in Illinois. It'd be great, say Wisconsin could be the state that determines who the next president is, coming up to Kenosha or Walworth or Rock County, or particularly places like that, or even if you want to come a little further, Milwaukee or Dane County, volunteer to be a poll watcher that day. And those sorts of things can help.
Just something I've been saying, for a while, that like the greatest indictment of the Harris-Biden record on border security is the fact that we're talking about illegal immigration and we're focused on Springfield, Ohio, and Charleroi, Pennsylvania, and Whitewater, Wisconsin. I wonder how much what's happened in Whitewater is extending beyond the corporate boundaries of Whitewater and getting the attention of cheeseheads.
Oh, tremendously so. I grew up in Delvin, just down the road. Whitewater was in our conference. I think it's not just Whitewater, for sure it is, but I've said for the last couple of years that anyone who knows about the word fentanyl knows that the border crisis isn't a border crisis issue. It's a national security crisis. And whether it's Whitewater or Wausau or anywhere else across the state of Wisconsin, we all know families who or friends or others, coworkers, who someone in their family or circle of friends has had an overdose because of things like fentanyl. And that's almost every instance directly linked to the border crossing. And that's why the establishment, many of the media elite don't get this, but that's why, second to the economy, that is a rising and important issue because people get it, they understand it, they know the negative impact, they know it's not about people wanting to come here to work, but rather people being sent over the border to push illegal drugs like and dangerous drugs like fentanyl, as well as human trafficking and firearm trafficking, and it's got to stop. And we had a plan that was working. And, Joe Biden, Kamala Harris pulled back on the effective work that Donald Trump and his team had done before. And it's become increasingly clear the only way it's going to be fixed is with new leadership. And the only thing that saved us over time was people like Greg Abbott, the governor of Texas, who defied the federal government and just sought to secure not only his border, but our country's border.
He is Scott Walker, former governor of Wisconsin, of course, former presidential candidate, now the president and CEO of the Young America's Foundation. If you have a son or daughter on a college campus looking to bring a conservative speaker to campus to expand the parameters of debate on campus, Young America's Foundation is where you want to go. Scott Walker, thanks so much for joining us as always. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Have a good one. Keep fighting for freedom.
Thank you. And he joined us on our turnkey.pro answer line.
Hear about the big stories of the day, then talk about them right here on Chicago's Morning Answer on AM 560. The Answer.
If you're a business owner, manager, HR director, anybody that needs to hire people and staff, and you're in McHenry County, this is for you. How's it going? Do you have the people you need? How's the quality of your applications? How much time do you spend on staffing issues? It's a problem, isn't it?